Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Today's episode will be about domestic violence. The reason that we're speaking about domestic violence today is that in our previous episode, we asked people, you beautiful people, to comment and ask us questions. So one of the questions that we got related to what is domestic violence about? How can I get assistance? And because this is in keeping with our platform for the Mrs. Universe South Africa, and as you may still remember from our previous episode, it relates to women against domestic violence. So that is what we'll be discussing today.
Thank you so much for all the comments and all the views. I think we were quite surprised at the number of views that we had, and it just shows that there's a lot of support and a lot of issues out there regarding domestic violence.
Definitely.
No, it's true. Domestic violence is so important in this day and age. Even in South Africa as well as around the world, violence based on gender and even in general has been escalating. And I think it's very important for people to be aware of what is domestic violence and what can they do to keep themselves safe from it.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important point.
I think also what's really interesting is the fact that a lot of people, we always associate domestic violence with a certain level of society, and yet the comments that we received were also of people of a higher level,
A professional level,
educated
Definitely.
people out there. So that is very worrying, and it makes you actually, when we discussed it, we decided let's zoom into it, because domestic violence doesn't come with a certain face.
100%.
It could be anyone, it could be somebody that you're working with, somebody you are socializing with, and you think, oh my, everything is okay, and it isn't. So quite a serious topic
And
as
it's so important to know that domestic violence is not just men against women. It can be the other way around, and it's not just between partners or married couples or single people. There's so many different types of domestic violence, and also it's important for people to know that you are not alone. We don't live in this world alone, and we need to ask for help. And for us to video stream this, and it's going to so many different places, the reach is so far, which we didn't realize until we saw how far our first video went. But people, it's for everyone, and don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah. I think also what we need to educate people about is that domestic violence comes from anyone that you have a domestic relationship with. So it could be your ex-husband, your ex-partner, even not necessarily just your husband. It's anyone whom you had a close relationship with. It could even be an aunt, an uncle, a brother, or a sister.
And I think also, Veronika, while you're saying that, I asked myself a question when I looked at some of the comments, and it was like, people always think that there must be a certain measure of violence before it becomes defined as domestic violence.
And it's absolutely not
and
that.
it isn't. So how much is enough? I think that's the thing that was coming up. But maybe you can also tell our viewers, as a starting point, what is domestic violence?
So like I explained when we started, domestic violence is violence within any domestic relationship, someone that you have a close relationship, and I've mentioned the different categories already. So if we're speaking about domestic violence, it can be physical abuse where someone is
Physically hurting you.
absolutely. It can be sexual abuse where you're being raped or assaulted.
And even in a married couple, you can say no. There's no such thing as rape doesn't occur in a married couple.
No, rape definitely can occur in a marriage. The moment you say no and someone violates your trust and goes against your will, then, or your wishes, then that is domestic violence, and that is rape also, which amounts to a criminal charge. And then the other thing that, or other form of domestic violence, which is common and a lot of people don't realize it, is the psychological abuse that it causes to the victim. Because, I mean, it instills a sense of fear in you. It makes you feel like you are not good enough if someone is insulting you, if someone is breaking down your character, if someone, most often the abusers or the perpetrators have so much of narcissistic tendencies that they tend to make you believe that you are basically holding a loaded gun to your head and causing yourself to be abused.
So, Veronika, you've covered physical abuse, you've covered sexual abuse, you've covered psychological, which also includes an emotional type of domestic violence. So, is there any other type of domestic violence that we've missed out?
Well, there's 4 main types, and you've already listed the 3. So the one that was not mentioned was economic abuse. And that is something that is very serious as well, because sometimes, I think you and I had a conversation about it earlier, where you spoke about some women are groomed into, like, you give me your salary and then I keep it for myself, or you agreed to give me your salary, and then a few months down the line, you now
You're
want...
not comfortable with that anymore.
Yes, you're not comfortable with that anymore because you don't have money to do things for yourself. And I mean, I know as women, there's lots of things that we need to do for ourselves. I mean, our upkeep as well. So it's so much. But not only just that in a marriage. What about if it's an elderly person as well that's living with
and
you?
And you know, that's something that we've seen around a lot, especially in healthcare, where we have the elderly that come in severely ill and malnourished and in a very poor state. And when you go back into it and you find out, you inquire, how did the person end up in the state where they're living at home,
Collecting a pension
collecting
as well.
a pension
Yes.
every month, only to find out that they've been kept locked up in their room, or if the person is staying in a shack, locked up, and every month the grandchild or even the
sad.
child comes in, takes the SASSA card, goes to the bank, withdraws the money, leaving the elderly person who cannot fight back, who cannot tell anyone, and just in that state until someone else finds them on the brink and just brings them in.
So I think we should talk about what are the signs and symptoms. What are that you know we can...
The red flags.
The red flags. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because how do you identify someone that you know of that you think could potentially be a victim of domestic violence? Because the most important thing is to support them, to help them, to break that cycle of abuse. So how would we identify? And how would we know ourselves if we fall into those different categories as well?
I think the first thing would be a sudden change in behavior. From a medical perspective, obviously if it's someone you've known for a long time, they would a sudden change in how they behave towards you, maybe becoming more closed off,
Becoming introverted.
when they were usually extroverted and telling you things about their lives. When they suddenly have negative reactions towards their spouse or the person that has been hurting them, obviously they'll want to avoid that person. They will not want to talk about that specific relationship. They will also
withdraw themselves as well from people.
Exactly. They will even become maybe more irritable. Don't ask me questions.
Or angry.
Yes,
I can
push
think it
it.
can frustrate you.
Exactly. And then the second thing would be the signs, which would be the physical signs. If it's the person is becoming physically abused,
You would see bruises.
more often there would be bruises in places that don't make sense to you. I fell down the stairs, I fell in the bathroom, and also becoming more and more frequent.
And also, if I'm thinking of that, as someone who is responsible for employees as well, you'll find that the person where they used to be attending work and punctual all the time, you can suddenly see there's a decline in that. There isn't that joyfulness and that energy anymore in the work that they perform, where they love to work and be there. Suddenly the person is not at work anymore, and
There's more absenteeism, coming late to work.
Absolutely.
There's not that energy and excitement being at work.
Yes, they want to sit quietly at their tables. They don't really want to talk, because I think maybe in a way they're also trying to find out, am I really a victim here? I don't like what's happening to me, but is this really happening to me? And can I trust the people around me with that kind of information.
Let's also talk about triggers. There could be certain triggers. So a person that usually you can joke and say, use a certain word with, maybe that word would start to trigger them because it's something that is used at home, and it's an abuse. It becomes an abusive word to them. Also, let's talk
when you
about
maybe say something in innocence, in all innocence to them, it may
and
trigger
a person overreacts.
Yes.
A second thing would be relationships, because abusers or the person that is perpetrating the domestic violence will also be more obsessive and possessive over
and
that
want
person.
to isolate you.
Not allow that
Yes.
person to meet with friends and family as much as they did anymore. Time constraints. They will not be able to stay late and work because they need to be home at a certain time. So those are also
And
some
not
signs.
participating if there's like functions and events, and they no
So you
longer want
basically see an absent person.
Yes, absolutely.
So especially if you are very close to someone and all of a sudden you haven't seen that person in 3 to 6 months, those are some signs to look out for.
Yeah, I think that's very important. But I think also what we must not overlook is that the emotional, psychological aspect, when you see that someone has changed in their demeanor, in their character, when they basically act out as someone who is fearful, or they're showing signs of depression as well. I think depression is something that's become so much more now prominent in our society, and we don't identify what are the signs of being depressed. And I think domestic violence can cause a person to become depressed, cause a person to become suicidal, cause a person to have want to withdraw from work, from friends, from community. And I think that is a very important point for us to note, that that's also one of the symptoms.
And
is the
also
person-
have a lot of negative feelings towards themselves. I am not good enough. I am not
Yes.
pretty.
Self-worth.
I have no way out. Because obviously the perpetrator will want to make them be in that position where they cannot escape, where they're stuck in that cycle.
Definitely.
And you know, I think it brings us to why we actually are doing this, trying to
Empower women.
empower women through the Mrs. Universe South Africa pageant, and the platform that's been given is to say, let's give more awareness, let's focus more, let's be more aware, let's now
Give
not-
women a
Yes,
voice to speak
exactly.
out. And let's support each other.
Yes.
I mean, isn't that what it's about? If you identify someone whom you think is in a domestic violence or an abusive
Situation.
relationship,
Mhm.
that you tell them that they matter. You
Each
care about
and
them.
every person,
Yes,
each
you
and every
support
woman.
them.
Yeah,
Definitely.
or man, women or man. We
Yeah.
know the focus is on women, but whoever it might be, let's be a little bit more aware. Let's start picking up on the signs, because in order to do something, it's like if you can help one person, you've helped one person. It's not just numbers. We mustn't look at the big numbers. We need to focus and zoom in on
Each one to reach one.
yes, and help each other up the ladder, which women in this day and age are not doing anymore. It's such a fight to get over each other, you know, up there. But
That's
you
so
don't
true.
have to do that. You can be the real heroine if you can just lift somebody up. Be the Joshua. You don't have to be the Moses, you know.
Just
I
to
think-
say, just to say that, listen, here is a safe place. You can talk to me. This thing of going and taking people's stories and talking behind people's backs, that likes to be associated with us as women. But we as women, we can hold each other. We can help each other. We can pull each other out of the
Motivate
spaces
each other.
that they are in, exactly. And to say that you don't need to be quiet. I am here for you. You can come to me and I will help you get help if you feel that there is no help for you to get by yourself.
Definitely. And that quote comes to my mind, which says that each woman that stands up for herself stands up for every woman.
Amen.
So I think we need to be that woman,
Yes.
you know? And I think it's a very powerful thing. I mean, when you were saying, you know, giving your spiritual example, because sometimes I think it's our human nature that we feel so depressed and oppressed, and we need to believe in something that is bigger and stronger than ourselves. I'm not sure, you know, what other people draw strength from and motivation from. But I know for me, it's God. It's my holding on to my beliefs.
Your faith.
It's my faith, and I'm a Christian. So for me, that is so powerful for me. That when I feel like everything around me is falling apart, I hold on to God with every fiber of my being, and it is Him who keeps me from falling. So I think it's important that we exercise our muscles of faith as well, and we encourage each other to stand on the Word of God, to stand on something that is bigger and stronger than ourselves, because we all need that. I think we need that motivation.
Absolutely.
And I think we forget how strong we are within ourselves.
Definitely.
You know, we forget that we have the strength to make the choices to take ourselves out of those situations, or even to make the choices to help others out of their situations, where we don't have to base your whole life does not have to be based on that person that's hurting you, but you can choose a life where you are happy and you deserve it. You know,
And
it's
to
not
change,
something.
to change something, to live differently, to make a choice.
And be a society that cares.
Yes, absolutely.
I think it comes back to the condition of your heart. You know, you need to have that caring, loving, empathetic heart.
And to be in a situation, when you say empathetic, so important. Put yourselves in that situation and think about, if it was me, where would my help come from? Is there help out there? How would I do things, differently to make somebody else's life? And to be that person that's approachable. That you might be Mrs. Universe South Africa semi-finalist, but can I approach you to say, help me, this is where I am? And to come down, I think, from our, what can I say?
Thrones.
To come down from our thrones and say, I'm here, I'm a servant. Let me serve you, let me help you. And a lot of people who have been victims needed other people to lift them up.
It's funny.
You needed to be that safe space where, if I can't anymore and I can't breathe anymore and I don't know what to do and I'm lost, can
Where
you
do I
just
go?
comfort me? Can you just keep me? And I think sometimes we forget that we may have needed that kind of comfort and protection and that safe haven. And now there's someone else that needs it.
You know, it's funny that you say it that way. You remind me of the saying that says, humans are social creatures. And when you find yourself in that place where you need help, there's always going to be someone. You're not as alone as you think you are. And all you need to do is phone a friend, phone a friend. Tell somebody. That is the first step, because once you can say it out to someone else,
Do not isolate yourself.
You've broken the cycle.
Silence.
And that is
And
where
you've broken the silence.
you've broken the silence, and that is where your help starts. You tell your church, you tell your community, you tell your friends,
Brother,
you tell
sister,
your brother,
someone
you tell your
trust.
parents, you tell someone, and that is the first step. But Veronika, you also have other resources that victims can also access. Tell us a bit about that.
So, if you are in a situation and you feel like some of the characteristics that we've expanded on today, sort of identify with you. So there is something called, or a piece of legislation rather, a very powerful piece of legislation called the Domestic Violence Act, which actually gives you the ability to approach a magistrate's court and basically fill out a form. And after you filled out the form, then based on your allegations, they would then grant you what is called an interim protection order. So an interim protection order will give you immediate, urgent relief. You will have to stay there. If you feel like you are not safe in your home environment, if you feel like you don't want the perpetrator to be in the house, if you feel like you don't want the perpetrator to be at your workplace, don't want to have contact with you telephonically, physically. So you would write all of that down on your form that you fill out, And when the interim protection order is granted, it's granted forthwith immediately with a return date. Return date is a date to come back to court to make that protection order final. So when you get the interim protection order, I think what we need to understand is that attached to that is a warrant of arrest forthwith, which you would then, after it is served on the perpetrator, it would then go to your nearest police station. So if this perpetrator violates the protection order, for example, if you say in your protection order he cannot have telephonic contact with you, or he cannot have physical contact with you, he cannot come to your home, he must desist from verbally abusing you, physically abusing you, and he does violate that and do one or the other of those things, you can then report it to the police, and because of that warrant of arrest that attached to the interim protection order, then that perpetrator would then be immediately arrested. So I think it's very important that we understand that we do have this vital tool at our disposal to protect ourselves.
So what if I am staying with the person that is hurting me? Do I need to move, or can I get a protection order that just protects me to say, as long as we are in the same vicinity, he can't hurt me?
Well, I think with every case, it will depend on the merits of and the facts of that case. So it depends on the level of abuse. Now, if he is being physically abusive, remember physical abuse is also assault. It's also a criminal charge. So if you are able to show the court that he is a danger to your life, because remember the interim protection order is an urgent interim form of relief. So if you can show the court that, look, my life is in danger, then you don't have to move as the victim. You can put it in your protection order that you want him to move perhaps to the outer house. You want him to move to another room. And if you don't think that that is going to assist, then you're also welcome to ask the court to have him move out of the house as well. I mean, it's well within your rights to do that. And I mean, every application in court is an application on merit and fact, and it will be then up to the presiding officer to decide, is there enough evidence before me to grant this or not?
I think that was a very important question, because sometimes it gets a bit complicated and real.
Definitely.
With you living with the person, and
you feel like there's no option.
Exactly, and maybe that's why you don't even go for help, because even if I get a protection order, then the practicality of things come in to say that, okay, where do I move? You know, is there places? And actually, there are a lot of places of safety for women out there, whether it's your local religious circles,
Tutuzela care centers,
exactly. There's so
NGOs.
many. So if you really ask the question, someone will give you the answer. It doesn't only mean that you're going to be like a burden to somebody. There are so many NGOs out there, and I think in this walk of yours with the Mrs. Universe South Africa semi-finalists, you've been meeting a lot of these NGOs, you know, that are there to support you. And it was amazing at the number of NGOs that there is out there. So people out there are doing some tremendous, beautiful work, and such a blessing.
Why don't you tell us more about that? What within the scope of domestic violence, who have you met, and what have you seen in your Mrs. Universe South Africa 2023 journey so far?
So I've seen, because of my professional career, I have worked a lot with domestic violence victims. And I think what I just want to say quickly is that we don't understand the stigma that is attached to reporting domestic violence. And I think that's something that we need to sort of clear the air about, that there isn't any stigma. And I know with us in the Indian community, with the brown people, domestic violence and speaking about it has not been something that is a very popular topic.
Not encouraged at all.
Not encouraged at all.
It's hush-hush, you know?
Yes, and if something happens to you because of the way that we were brought up, the way that we were socialized, we don't feel comfortable talking about it or even breaking the cycle, because I know a lot of the women that I've worked with have said to me, but I was told to stay in my marriage. I was told that I need to make it work. And I think a lot of times when women are not in the same economic footing as their husbands, they feel compelled to stay and to take the abuse, because where do they go? Their family is not supporting them leaving this marriage, and if they leave the marriage, where do they go? You know, what do they
Because
do?
family
How do-
doesn't support you, they don't encourage it. And then
Yes.
also you stay because you've got children, you've got kids. A lot of, the older generation will say to you, make it work, let's find a way to make it work. Think of the children. But actually we know that if you're not happy and if there's abuse and violence in your marriage, what
Absolutely.
message are you sending to the next generation?
And then
Are they really happy there, or would they rather be happier not in this vicious cycle, because they also become victims to this domestic violence?
and
And
it psychologically
and then
abuses the children.
what about on the other side of the coin, where you have men that are being victims of domestic violence because of their wives? And as men, they have their own stigma where they can't talk out, because as a man, you're supposed to be the head of your family, and how can you say that your wife is
Being abusive towards
abusing you like as
Yeah,
a
I
man?
think it's a real
And who
conversation.
do you tell? Maybe the elder patriarchs in your family will look down on you. Your friends will
like who's
laugh
really
at
wearing
you.
the apron strings, that kind
And
of
the
thing.
fear of talking out for men as well.
But what about if it's a child? And who helps the child as well? So if it is a child victim as well, the Domestic Violence Act caters for children that are in abusive relationships as well, where a parent or an elder, a guardian, can make an application for the interim protection order on behalf of the child as well. So there is that protection for children.
So that is listening skills, to be able to listen to your children and hear what they are trying to tell you, which is very hard.
when our lives are so
Sometimes-
busy.
To
I
make
think
time
from
for
our own
conversation.
perspectives,
I think that needs to be a whole
I
other
know
topic of listening to your
Listening to your
children,
children.
because life gets so busy.
It does.
Thank you, South Africa, for joining us once again with Coffee with V. It was really a pleasure talking about some very important things in life, sensitizing and bringing awareness to those that need it, both victims, both perpetrators. Maybe even if you're a perpetrator and you were not aware of it, we hope that we've touched something in you, sparked something out there. Indeed a pleasure to join you again.
And don't forget again, like, comment below, subscribe, share to your friends. Remember, a woman alone is strong, but women together are stronger. And just a little bit of a sneak preview, look forward to Self-Defense by Veronika Pillay, our
That's gonna
Mrs.
be
Universe
exciting.
South Africa 2023 semi-finalist. And thank you again for having us.
Thank you guys, it was such a pleasure.